Hi, this is Jonathan Rosenhead, Jerusalem psychotherapist. This week's Torah and Psychology post for Parshas Vaeschanan is going to look at a puzzling juxtaposition that we see in the Psukim in this week's Parsha. That it presents the Issa of Bal Tigra and Bal Tosif, the Issa of adding or detracting from the way that a mitzvah is performed. And it's juxtaposed with the Issa of serving Bal Pa'or. Now, on face value, these seem to have no real connection. Why would the Torah place them together and connect them, seemingly giving this message that there is a connection between them? So we want to look at this a little bit deeper, try to understand and see what we can take out from what the Torah is telling us, that there is a connection. So one suggestion, which is brought by Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, is that Baal Pa'or, if we look at the Avodah Zarah of Baal Pa'or, it's a strange Avodah Zarah, because the way that it is served is through defiling it, excreting, desecrating the Avodah Zarah, which would ostensibly look like you're trying to not show any kavod, not trying to show any respect to this Avodah Zarah. But that is the way that it is served. So therefore, even if a person has the intention, or externally they say that they are performing an act that is intended to defile, to desecrate, and not to show any respect to this Avodah Zarah. But we're being told by the Torah that is the way that it is served. That is the way that this Avodah Zarah is practiced by people. And therefore, even if it looks like that you're trying to do the right thing, it looks like externally from an objective point of view, it looks like it's a positive action. It looks like you're trying to actually disqualify and desecrate and discredit the Avodah Zarah. What we're being told is that is the way it's being served, and therefore it's still an Issur. So too, if you move over to Bal Tigra and Bal Tosif, we're being told that even if you're trying to perform, you're still performing the mitzvah, you're still putting on tefillin, you're still carrying out the mitzvah in that you're outwardly you're engaged in an action that's bringing you closer, or trying to show some sort of a connection with the Kadosh Baruch when you're performing his mitzvahs. What we're told is that in a similar way to Baal Pa'or, just because that's the way it looks externally, objectively, like it's some positive action. It looks, from an external point of view, it looks like that this is something which is acceptable, something that should be, in a way, maybe giving credibility and giving validation to this action. We're told no. We're told that you can't add more parshas, for example, to the tefillin, even if you're putting on tefillin to serve a Kadosh Baruch Hu. It is an issa. It doesn't necessarily matter what it looks like externally. That it looks like you're still performing the mitzvah, or it looks like you're defining the Avodah Zarah. We're being told that there is a certain way that things should be performed or should be done. There is something intrinsic and essential that we need to understand in. Is it still Avodah Zarah? Is it still the mitzvah? We're trying to work out what is from an authentic and honest perspective, what is really happening here. And that's the connection that the Torah is making between Bal Tigra, Bal Tosif, and Bal Pa'or. These two things are showing whether the action that we are seeing can be viewed as a legitimate action of desecration of Avodah Zarah, or a legitimate action of connection and performing the mitzvah, or perhaps not. And it requires a certain level of honesty as well, and being able to look at it from a deeper level. That's the message that Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky brings in terms of the connection between these two aspects in the pasuk. And from a mental health perspective, I think this actually brings an interesting and quite, in a way, sensitive point, in that people that with chronic mental illness, for example, or just in general, people who are going through a therapeutic process. What I've seen in my work is that it can be that sometimes when a person starts to show from outwardly, externally, there's an indication that perhaps the signs of improvement, they're starting to do more of something, or they're starting to do less of something, depending on what the situation is. It could be more or less is better. It could be externally that they're engaged in a certain action, that it looks like they're actually doing it for a positive reason. It indicates that they are actually directing their behavior in a way that it should be adaptive and positive. But it's important from the point of view of the therapist, and this is where perhaps they have to have clinical judgment in terms of how to assess the person's behavior, how to assess the change that is happening in a person's behavior and the way that they are functioning. Because sometimes this change could actually be indicative and could be indicating that they are not balanced, that the change is actually unhealthy or is extreme, where suddenly they're doing more of something or less of something, where there's been this change and they're engaging in actions where outwardly it looks like there's an improvement, but it could be that they're going to an extreme level. Perhaps they're entering into a state which is more manic, and they're entering into the emotional state where they're high in terms of their emotional balance, rather than being able to be connected and honest with themselves that they are going through an authentic change. It's actually they're doing less or more of something because they're fluctuating. And this does happen. This can be, unfortunately, a part of, and a very difficult and complex part of the therapeutic process and part of the treatment of people with mental illness. Is being able to assess and evaluate whether the behavior, whether the actions of a person and the change is showing something which is authentic and it actually and validates a healthy change, or as we see from Baal Tigra and Baal Tosif or Baal Pa'or, there is a sensitivity and there is a risk that the action and the behavior is not healthy. And it's very it's sensitive, it's difficult, and it requires the cooperation, the collaboration between the person who is suffering and between the therapist, in order to assess and come to a clear understanding and evaluation of what is actually happening. Have a great Shabbos and keep well.